The X history book is a long one, so you know we needed a part 2 to this list. Welcome back, Nerd Squad. We're here again to talk about some of the top 10 worst moments in X-Men history, this time on our part 2, both in and outside of the canon. Join me as we get counting. Number 10. The Fate of SQUID-BOY. SQUID-BOY and his friendship with Juggernaut was one of the redeeming elements of Chuck Austin's run on the X-Men, which is pretty widely disliked among fans of the X-Men. Austin's run is also the one that featured the relationship which was highly controversial between Husk and Angel. However, one of the things that was pretty cool about his run was how Juggernaut was brought into the book and somewhat redeemed. Juggernaut even befriended Sammy, known as SQUID-BOY, a young mutant who was ridiculed at school for his appearance and came to join the Xavier Institute. SQUID-BOY would save Juggernaut's life and the two would become friends, with Kane even becoming like a father to SQUID-BOY, whose own father mistreated him as Kane's once had. Despite them both protecting one another, at one point SQUID-BOY stumbles upon a meeting that Juggernaut is attending with the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Gasp. Tragically, SQUID-BOY did not know that Juggernaut was acting as a double agent for the X-Men. Causing a scene and accusing Juggernaut of being a traitor, Black Tom Cassidy reacted by killing the young mutant. What an end to that initially sweet and uplifting story. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list, be sure to give it a like and let us know down below what you think one of the worst moments in X-Men history is, both in terms of controversy or just in terms of bad things that have happened to mutants. Number 9. Beast's not so subtle disguise. At one point, the X-Men get kidnapped and brainwashed by Mesmero, forced to join the circus. At the time, Hank wasn't even really with the X-Men, but was instead a member of the Avengers. But when he answers a call from the mutants and finds the X-Mansion deserted, he still of course looks for his fellow friends and former and future comrades. While searching, Beast decides to adopt a disguise. This is already after Beast is covered in bright blue fur, so what disguise does he go for? Trench coat and a hat. You got it. Even stranger, for the most part, his disguise actually works. It's only after his hat is removed that even the brainwashed X-Men seem to realize that there's something weird going on with his appearance. Don't worry though, despite the fact that Hank is kinda awful at disguises in this story, he's still a brilliant and dexterous fellow who is able to help save the X-Men in the end. Number 8. Avengers vs. X-Men. Avengers vs. X-Men pitted two superhero groups both known for doing massive good and saving the world on multiple, countless occasions really, against one another. How do you even make these two groups fight one another? Enter the Phoenix Force. Avengers and X-Men decide to take one another on because they disagree on what to do with the Phoenix Force, which is headed to Earth to merge with its current ideal host, Hope Summers, the mutant messiah. The X-Men want to protect Hope but also think the Phoenix could be useful, while the Avengers think the cosmic power is too dangerous and should be destroyed. All in all, Avengers vs. X-Men created a lot of problems, especially for the X-Men going forward. It also is a big part of the later split between Storm and Black Panther, who were actually married at the time. While the X-Men and mutant kind were at least mostly united in this front, although, Wolverine had some conflicting feelings of his own about it, Avengers vs. X-Men was also considered to be one of the greatest clashing of ideals since the first Civil War event from 2006. Number 7. Fox. Fox was one of the weirdest X-Men to have never really existed, and also was pretty creepy considering the moves she put on Gambit. Fox attempted to seduce Gambit away from Rogue at a time when the couple were having some pretty intense intimacy problems. I mean, Rogue and Gambit have had intimacy problems physically for years in the comics, but I'm talking about intimacy on really all levels, including emotional intimacy. Emma Frost at the time was trying to provide a sort of couples counseling for them and offer them a free space psychically for them to connect romantically in ways they couldn't in the physical world at that time. Fox played on Gambit's struggles, flirting with him and offering herself physically to him. One, this was pretty messed up as Fox was actually a mutant student of his, and 2, it was really messed up because it was later revealed that Fox actually wasn't a student at all, didn't really exist, but was actually Rogue's adoptive mother Mystique in disguise, who didn't believe that Gambit was good enough for her daughter and later claimed to have been testing Gambit. Number 6. Cyclops kills Professor X. Now granted, this also happened as a result of the Avengers vs. X-Men story arc. Cyclops ended up killing Professor X because he was possessed by the Phoenix Force and ultimately had so much power with him that it basically corrupted him. But this was also not a great time for Professor X in comic book history. So even if you disagree with Cyclops' actions here, and I think most people do, I think you can at least understand why this happened. This was following a time where many dark truths about Xavier and his lies to the X-Men were unearthed. Among them was the sentience of the Danger Room, itself an AI cyborg mutant, as well as the revelation in Deadly Genesis that Xavier had sent Moira McTaggart's mutant team into Krakoa only for them to perish. Quote-unquote perish. A truth which Vulcan forced the Professor to confess. Professor X was on a path of redemption at the time of his death at the hands, or rather optic blasts, of Cyclops, but he was still overshadowed by a pretty dark time in his own history. Number 5. Meet Daddy Nightcrawler. Probably one of the weirdest storylines we have ever had in comics happens to be one where we learned about the truth behind who Nightcrawler's father was. Did we need to know this? Did we really care about this? I mean, Kurt already had an adoptive family who are admittedly pretty cool, and he's got Mystique for a mom, which might not be as cool in terms of like Mystique being a good mom, but it's definitely interesting. But we also, I guess, had to give him a dad to help explain even more the way Nightcrawler looks and his powers. In a storyline where demonic mutants known as Neophim were pitted against angelic mutants known as Cheophim, implying that mutants are related to both heaven and hell, or at least some of them are, we learned that Azazel is a powerful, satanic-like demonic being who was actually Nightcrawler's father, and had only sired him in an attempt to free himself and his fellow Neophim from the Brimstone dimension where they were trapped. Number 4. Necrosha. The massacre at Genosha, which we talked about on part 1, was really bad. But even worse, it also paved the way for another tragic event when Necrosha happened. Tragic, scary, Necrosha's a lot of things. Necrosha was when Selene of the Externals, not to be confused with Marvel's Eternals, who are a totally different thing, decided to make her home base the devastated Genosha. Selene ended up taking control of all the dead left on Genosha, resurrecting them, and utilizing them as an undead army to attack the new mutant island of Utopia. Yeah, it was pretty bad. Not only does Selene seek to get revenge on the X-Men either, and also conquer Utopia, but her plan here is to basically become a bona fide goddess who would be pretty dangerous and scary indeed. Number 3. Inferno from 2021. During the most recent Inferno event, a lot of truths were unearthed about the true allegiances of those who came together to create Krakoa, and just exactly who was behind the whole mutant island paradise. Now, we already knew that story, but not all mutants, in fact not many mutants, did. The truth was that the idea of what Krakoa is was founded by Magneto and Professor X, as well as their ally and friend Moira McTaggart, who we recently found out during the House of X series was actually a mutant. Moira claimed she wanted to help her fellow mutants, but in reality she planned to actually end mutant kind, which is what's revealed in Inferno. But instead of destroying them, she wanted to disguise her destruction in the guise of a mutant paradise, kind of giving them like one last hurrah as they would eventually die out, as per her plan. During Inferno, Moira's betrayal was brought to light, and she was exiled from Krakoa. Number 2. Mutant Massacre. Now sometimes referred to as the Morlock Massacre, but back in the day it was simply known as the Mutant Massacre. This was before massive mutant attacks like Genosha ever happened, which is also what made this so much more shocking and horrible at the time. Although it happened on a smaller scale, the Mutant Massacre happened when Mr. Sinister in essence ordered the Morlocks be eradicated. He sent his team of marauders to handle them and attack, killing many who lived down in the sewers. It was, as it is called, a mutant massacre. For those unfamiliar, the Morlocks are less pretty mutants basically. Ones who have dramatic physical mutations, which often make it impossible for them to walk among humans on the surface world, at least without going unnoticed. So they tend to stick to their own kind and the sewers. Think the sewer mutants from Futurama. It's kind of what they're like. Morlocks, as such, sometimes are considered more antagonistic mutants who resent the mutants sometimes who are able to walk freely among men. Now, not all Morlocks are like that, and in reality, for the most part, they're actually peaceful and innocent folks who have been even more ostracized and rejected from the world than most other mutants. So they definitely didn't deserve to be massacred. It was really awful. Number 1. M-Day. M-Day has to have been one of the worst moments in mutant history. Although I actually gave Genosha the top spot on my part 1 of this list, that's because, I pretty much always talk about M-Day, we don't usually talk about Genosha, and I wanted to save that for a potential part 2, which I figured was coming, and here it is. Decimation is by far one of the worst things to have ever happened to mutant kind. Genosha simply doesn't get enough acknowledgement because it ended up being overshadowed by the devastation of M-Day, which happened only a few years later, with M-Day happening in 2005 and the massacre at Genosha happening in 2001. M-Day happened as a result of Scarlet Witch striking out at mutant kind after the events of House of M, where she attempted to create a reality where many heroes were happy, but after learning of its falseness, was once again rejected by all those she had basically tried to help. Namely though, Wanda was striking out at her then to be believed father, Magneto, who she claimed loved mutant kind more than he did his own family. Wanda said the words "no more mutants," and with that small utterance depowered or destroyed millions of mutants the world over. What were some of the worst moments in X-Men history for you? Do you prefer learning about the worst things in canon, in terms of controversy, or in terms of reader receptions and shock factor if you will? Let us know in the comments below. This has been Top 10 Nerd, and I'm your host Amanda McKnight. I'll see you in the next video, but until then, you stay nerdy, YouTube.